evening, everyone. Welcome to the 23rd Annual Kit Thomas Memorial Oration. This year, the oration will be rendered by Sri T.M. Krishna, musician, author, and activist on social and cultural issues. Sri T.M. Krishna was awarded the Raman Magsaysay Award in 2016 for his forceful commitment as an artist and advocate to heal India's social division. Today, he will share his thoughts on music and math, visualizing the abstract with us. We begin the program with the invocation rendered by the school choir. They will sing the hymn, Be Thou My Vision. Now invite Dr. Salim Thomas, President of Kit Thomas Educational Society, to introduce the orator of the evening.
Our speaker, Mr. Krishna, trustees of the school, members of the Committee of Management, distinguished guests, alumni of the Lawrence School, Lovedale, and of Sishya, Principal Omna Thomas, and members of the staff, boys and girls. I cannot tell you what a pleasure it is to welcome you all back to the Kit Thomas Memorial Oration after a gap of almost 2 years brought about by the COVID. I am particularly happy to tell you that one of the members of the class of 1953 from Lovedale is here this evening to honor his former headmaster. Today we have an outstanding speaker and no doubt with a talk that will leave us with much to think about. Some years ago, some of the junior school children were digging a hole at the rear of this auditorium when a senior student went by and said, "Don't dig there, you may find the bones of Mr. Thomas." Now that may not be true, but this school, the entire campus, and the ethos of pedagogy here has the essence of Mr. Thomas. In every brick, every grain of sand, every leaf, and in everything the school stands for. On his retirement from Lovedale in 1971, he came to Chennai and started a small school to keep himself occupied. Parental pressure and societal demand has led to the school expanding and becoming today one of the foremost day schools in not just the state, but also the country. He often jokingly said the ideal school would be an orphanage because there would be no parents to deal with. No doubt, but I must say that in the 30 years I've been responsible for the running of this school, I could not have asked for a finer set of parents. Many of them are Kit's former students, both from Lovedale and from Sishya. We also have grandchildren who are third generation Kit acolytes. Mr. Thomas had two principles when it came to teaching. One was not to take childhood away from children, and the other was to instill in them a sense of confidence and moral worth. I'm not surprised that many of his former students have seen fit to send their children and their children's children to Kit's school. I had approached Mr. Krishna back in December 2019 to be our orator for April 2020. The unexpected advent of the pandemic put paid to that. But we appreciate the willingness with which he accepted our renewed invitation. Sir, we are honored to have you deliver the oration in our Golden Jubilee year. Mr. Krishna is no stranger to controversy. I had thought to describe him as Carnatic musician and social activist in the invitation. However, his incisive and immediate response was singer, author, activist. This description clearly indicates how he views himself, and not in isolation, but in merging them to his needs. His performances of Carnatic music have varied from music built on the old forms and stamped with a new authority, awakening of his own interpretations. He has also written extensively about the social aspects of the performers and those who created the instruments for them. Some years ago, his social activism put him in the bad books of the Delhi bureaucracy, and he was refused permission to perform in the capital. Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal was quick to offer him another stage to perform on to demonstrate his talent and skills. Mr. Krishna has been recognized nationally and internationally for his efforts to use music to eradicate the barriers of caste and community by the universality of music. He was awarded the Magsaysay Award in 2016 and the Indira Gandhi Award for National Integration in 2017, amongst many other honors. He has recently been appointed to the committee to revamp the state's education policy. Our congratulations to you, sir, and a request to apply the same innovative approach you have used as a vocalist to cut away the dead wood and to reverse the attitude of parents who have voted with their feet to walk away from state board schools. If the Delhi government can do it, why not the government of Tamil Nadu? Without further ado, let me welcome Mr. Krishna to Sishya as the Kit Thomas orator for 2022.
Good evening, and thank you all for inviting me to deliver the Kit Thomas Oration for the year 2022, and delayed by 2 years, but I'm so glad that it's happening in person and not on some digital medium and virtual interface with everybody uncomfortable with what's going on. I'll start with 2 confessions. Firstly, I come from the enemy campus. So for those who don't know what the enemy campus, it's called The School KFI right around the block. Okay? You may not know, the students now may not, because the school doesn't exist there, but in the old days, there was this intense rivalry. Not that there were too many schools in this vicinity anyway, so if Sishya came to play basketball in our campus, there was serious trouble. So I come from the enemy camp, 1. 2, I was a terrible student of mathematics. So I'll start with these 2 confessions. Okay? There seems relief over here. I completely sympathize with that relief. I got it. Don't worry. The reason I said that, right at the offset, is one of the questions I was asked by one person as I came. He said, "So you have a background in mathematics?" So I was like, very hesitantly said, "No." So I'm sure he was thinking, what is this guy going to talk about? So, this mathematics is one of those demons, or it's something you have a love affair with. And within the Indian culture especially, if you didn't get math, then you are like slightly lower than the rest. There's this hierarchy of education, right? Engineering right up there, math, just math somewhere in between. The lowest is literature, of course. Everything else is in between, right? So we've all grown up in this mindset, right? And I've always found it interesting. Mathematicians many who would have been very average musicians, I'm sure, would freely speak about music. And nobody will question them. It's like, what do you know about music? But musicians speaking about mathematics is almost like, I'm nervous today. It's like, what do I know about it? So, in spite of the fact that we keep saying music and math are close to each other, well, are they is, of course, a big question, which we will try and ponder about today. There is this ease with which anybody has an opinion about music, but anybody cannot have an opinion about mathematics. So there is this hierarchy of even thinking about something, let alone expressing an opinion about something. So, I'm coming from that background. There is also a need, I think, I sing Carnatic music, and it's not just Carnatic music, many musical forms. There's this need almost for us to always say our music is scientific, to say that there is mathematics in Carnatic music. I don't even know why we need to say it. It is what it is, isn't it? But there is this need for an affirmation from the mathematical or the computing world. It's probably a trivialization of mathematics, but nevertheless I'll say it, that there is something structured, something organized about a musical form, and we desperately seek that kind of acknowledgement and affirmation. So I'm not going to speak about that today. Another thing I'm not going to speak about is about how music can aid better learning. No, I'm not going to discuss that. That's done ad nauseum. Or about how you can use music to learn math. I'm not going to speak about that. Or how in musical forms we use pretty much arithmetic, or how prime numbers are used, or the Fibonacci sequence is used. I'm not going to talk about all those things, about how those things, but rather talk about the activity of mathematics and the activity of music as an action, and ponder about that more than anything else. So uses of math or uses of music is not going to be the topic. In fact, G.R. Hardy, the mathematician, said something interesting about useful math. He said useful math is dull. Fascinating. So I don't know how many people here like applied math. Well, you're doing dull stuff, according to Hardy. So there is this activity of mathematics and music beyond its utility. We know math is used to build bridges, your computers, anything in this world is. But then, is there something more to it? And Is it there that we can talk about the two in similar terms and in dissimilar terms, is what I'm going to ponder about in front of you, and I hope you will participate in your own way. So if we are saying that utility is not the subject of my conversation, what is it? Why do I sing? You could just simply say you sing because you like to please people. It's a fair answer, I guess. Cannot refute it. But is there something else that makes me sing or makes me seek music? Is there something else that makes the mathematicians seek those figures and those designs and those signs and those correlations? What is that seeking? What are we looking for? Are we looking for something? To ponder that, let's go back in time a bit. Where did it all begin? Let's start with math. Maybe counting was the first way things began. Number of kills you had, maybe a day. You need to know how much food you have for the next day. Maybe you needed spatial. Because you went for the hunt, you need to know location. You need to have an idea of distance. So the cave man or the cave hunter had to have a notion of distance, of time, of how much food is required for, say, a week. How many times do we need to go and hunt? Maybe that was where the beginnings of mathematics in some manner, the idea of counting and measuring and gauging began. Of course, complex math comes much later, probably around 3000 BC or something like that. But let's leave that. Where did music come from? Now, there is this story of this flute made out of the bone. It's supposed to be about 30,000 years. There's, of course, debate whether that's really a flute or whether it was something done by an animal. But music also began with sounds that were picked up in nature. Just as the cave person wanted to find out where to go and get what and how much, he also heard things in nature. Now, the interesting thing here is we always say, for example, the nightingale sings. The nightingale never said it sings. It's probably just calling a mate, right? Or the parrot. Who called it music? You and I called it music, not the bird. So, very much like math or the idea of measuring or understanding that was derived from a human action of association, music also was a human action of association of finding meaning. So, whether it was flutes out of bamboo or out of bones or whatever, music was something the species created. The species felt a need for. But why? Why did we need music? There was no necessity for music, is what we can argue. It's something that is still being pondered about. Why was music created? Why do we have all these things around us? And here I will try and see if I can look at two things that are common. One thing first that's common between the two. As a species, there is one thing that we all do, and which is very common to mathematics and music, which is pattern. And our whole evolutionary process has been about our ability of recognizing patterns. We recognized day, night. We recognized stars. We recognized forms. We recognized herds. So, and in music, it's very similar. You recognize patterns. So at a very basic level, both these activities are about recognizing patterns. But it's not as simple as that. I could recognize patterns of two birds making a sound. But music is not just that, is it? And neither is math. It's not about recognizing that there is a pattern in the sky or there is something about the leaf. It is not just that. There is another aspect to it. The literal that is being seen in nature, in both cases, somehow is internalized and understood in a non-literal manner. In other words, the leaf has certain designs, but that design itself may have a meaning or may have a comprehension beyond that leaf. Or in musical sense, if I was going to say the same thing, there may be a sound that I heard from something, but I want to know what is it about that sound beyond the fact that I heard it on this day from this bird or this animal. So the translation of the literal to beyond the literal is a very important aspect of both activities. And the only way we can do that is by doing something called abstraction. And I want to talk about abstraction a little bit. To explain abstraction in very simple terms, I stand before you and speak to you on this date, delivering the oration. This is a literal happening of today. But the idea of somebody speaking is not bound by this event. The idea of somebody speaking, somebody listening, is beyond this event and exists beyond any specific event. That is the abstraction of today's event. If what I speak today, or what you listen to, or you engage in, is not only conditioned by the fact that you heard T.M. Krishna say this, but the idea remains beyond this, then an act of abstraction has taken place. Mathematics is exactly the same thing. It is to abstract what is seen in literal nature. It could be through human interaction, it could be through the leaves, it could be through nature, it could be association, and find meaning in it, in the association, beyond its literal existence in nature. This urge to find something that is beyond an event is common both to music and to mathematics. So, you could ask this question, why do we need to do this? It's a fascinating point. Why did human beings want to do this? What are we seeking? What is this meaning we are seeking? Rather than say it's meaning, I would say we are seeking an experience. If I feel very sad about a death in my family, I feel sad, say my father died, and I'm very upset about my father's death. It is still about me and my father. It is still about my relationship with my father. But if I want to understand what death is, or the experience of death, then it has to go beyond me and my father, which is what, by the way, theater does, which is exactly what theater does. If you look at theater, you're watching a play. Somebody dies on stage, and you cry. All of us know nobody died. All of us know nobody died. We know it's an act, but you still cried. Why? Think about it. Why? You experienced the idea of death. Beyond nostalgia, you may think of somebody dying in your family. Beyond that, you still get affected. Because the experience of death is what you are having at that moment. Similarly, math gives you an experience of nature in abstract terms. Music gives you an experience of nature and life in abstract terms. That you can actually be unselfish in some manner while associating with these abstract values. And this is a very important aspect of both math and music. Wilhelm Leibniz said something about interesting quote about music. He said, music is a secret exercise in the arithmetic of sound, unaware of its act of counting. I'll repeat it. Music is a secret exercise in the arithmetic of sound, unaware of its act of counting. And Pythagoras said something very different but interesting too. He said there is geometry in the humming of the strings, and there is music in the spacing of the spheres. There is geometry in the humming of the strings, and there is music in the spacing of the spheres. What do we mean by this? Because none of these are literally true. None of these are literally true. Both these are experiential. To feel that there is a sense of counting without counting there in music is an experience. To feel the geometry in the music, but not recognize it as geometry, but just feel it, is an experience. And to also see the music in the spheres or of its spacing is something you experience. So unlike what we think of math, of it being something about nuts and bolts and something about, very, very, very tactile and literal things, Math is actually something beyond that, which is why there is this madness to mathematicians as much as there's a madness to artists and musicians. There are two things that math and music share, generic things. I will call them time and space. Don't go to Einstein immediately. I'm not talking about time and space in that sense. The idea of time and space. You could very easily have on the y-axis space and on the x-axis time. I would put rhythm and melody, or frequency and time. So the whole idea of time and space exists in both. In fact, there is this word, a Sanskrit word we use in Carnatic music, laya. It's a beautiful term. It's very hard to translate what it is. It's not a rhythmic cycle. It's not a click. It's a sensibility. It's a sensibility of time. For time to be experienced, two things are necessary. One is an event, two is an interval. If you have consecutive events without an interval, you will not experience time. If you only have an interval, you will never experience time. So the relationship between interval and event is time. All of us, for example, go on a car ride. The first day, it seemed to take much longer than the second day. Same distance, probably same amount of time. Why do we feel this way? It's actually got to do with the fact that you didn't have enough events the next day when you traveled. Say you spaced out, or you were, say, part of a very intense conversation. Either way, you did not sense the events that took place to reach that place. The first day, you noticed a store, then you noticed the traffic, then you noticed, a lorry, you noticed a traffic jam, and therefore the distance was longer. So in a way, time, by the way, can be talked about in minutes and seconds, but many times time is what you experience, what you feel. You feel time, and you feel the same 5 minutes in different ways. How is that even possible? It's just 5 minutes. And that's a very important aspect of both music and understanding how time operates, even in the real world. And there are a couple of similar things that happen. In music, for example, I'm going to use a few words. If I was going to, say, compose a song or sing a song, there are certain things that always happen in music, irrespective of the kind of music I'm talking about. There is a point of attack, which is my entry, okay? So if there is something happening, there's a point I enter, and that's a point of attack. That's the entry point. And then I start filling the space and move you through that time. I fill the space. How I fill the space depends on what the music is, and it affects what you hear. And the space is filled through constant movement. The movement, the extent of the movement, the speed of the movement determines what you experience. Well, all this can be discussed in terms of math, but I'm talking musically. And underlying this entire experience, there's a pulse. Underlying this entire thing. When I speak to you today, there's a pulse. If there is no pulse in my speaking, you will not hear me. There's a pulse, there is an attack, there is a loudness when I want to say something more, there is a retreat, there is a calmness, and all this is what makes you experience what I speak in terms of space and time. And math is not very different. But you can ask this question, and this is a question again that's been pondered over by many, many people. Is there intrinsically something mathematical about the way we listen? Meaning, physiologically, for example, is there a reason, is there something mathematical about what we listen and how we listen? For example, we could go down that road, and I'm going to go a little bit. For example, the idea of consonance and dissonance. This is this basic understanding that any two notes is considered consonant if the ratio is simple. The idea of dissonance, for those who don't, consonance when you feel that two things are, to put it simplistically, pleasant and melodious, okay? Dissonance is when something is little hard or harsh or seems out of sync. For example, most of the tunes that you hear when there is a death have notes that are dissonant. So there is an association of sadness, by the way, to dissonance. So most dissonant combinations are complex ratios, meaning that the numerator and the denominator are usually larger numbers. This is something that we all experience. The octave, for example, the same note in 2 octaves, is the second harmonic, which is why if 2 people sing in 2 octaves, it sounds like the same sound. The other thing about consonants is that the partials of the 2 notes, if there are 2 notes being played, coincide at some point, which is why the pleasantness happens. Now, is this a universal feature? Is it just physiological? Is it all our auditory systems built in a manner that we recognize consonance and dissonance in this manner? And in a way, we are all universal in what music we like? We know that's not true, right? We all know that's not true, but is there? So there was an interesting experiment done in 2015 about, a scientist went down to South America, and I don't know how to pronounce it, it's the Tsimane tribe. And they tried to go to a tribe who have been, shall we say, least affected by Western ideas of tone and sound, exactly? I mean, least influenced, to find out whether they also perceive dissonance and consonance like we do. According to his study, he said they distinguish between the two. Yes, there's a distinguishing feature between the two, but there is no preference. It's not like they prefer consonance to dissonance. Of course, this has been re-argued, and there are other scientists who don't believe this is absolute, but that's an interesting place to go, and I want to expand that a bit. Because if I was to accept this mathematical idea that there is something universal about the way consonance and dissonance and the ratios affecting the way I appreciate music, then why do we have different kinds of music, and some music sound dissonant to me, some sound dissonant to you? Well, a simple example is, say, even Carnatic music, which I sing. To most people who listen to Hindustani music, Carnatic music sounds horrible, even off-key, off-tune. To me, listening to Makam music from the Middle East, many times I thought they were off-key. Why go so far away? I've heard music, for example, in the Kuttu tradition in Tamil Nadu or anywhere. The first time I heard it, I thought it was awful. So I'm just trying to be careful over here, right? To reduce something to just in questions of, say, numbers in some sense. Because many times then we are judging other forms of listening, other forms of hearing, other forms of appreciation. So there may be a universality, but singing in pitch, we all think we understand singing in pitch. But it is culturally specific. It is specific to every form. When this idea of, there are people who can, or children even, who can identify perfect pitch. You just put one tone and they'll tell you it's this pitch, they'll tell you that's pitch, they'll tell you everything. But to sing in pitch is different in my music to different in another music, to cinema music, to everything. So what is beyond the consonance and the dissonance and the habituated and even maybe our auditory system's functionality? One thing we know is that our entire auditory system is always learning. We know for example, the brain processes music in a different way from speech. There are overlaps, but there are also great divergence in it. Many more parts of our brain are activated when music is heard. So there's a lot happening. And since I spoke about pitch, let me throw in a few words. They are words out of math, out of numbers, and they are also words we use in music. Frequency, for example. Now, frequency can be anything. That's a frequency. Pum is also a frequency. What's the difference between the two? This is non-harmonic. Pum is harmonic. That's the only difference. And if you speak to a physicist or a mathematician, they will tell you a harmonic frequency is a tone. But a musician like me will not agree. I will say there's something more to it. I'll say, fine, there is frequency, which is just a number, say 148 hertz. I'm just giving you an arbitrary number now. 148 hertz is the number. When it is harmonic, it's a pitch, which means it's recognizable. To sing for you, is recognizable as a position. But is it music? Now, that's an interesting question. Is it still music? And my answer will be no, that's not music. What needs to happen for that to become music? That has to have emotion. That has to have the heart of the singer. That has to have a cultural context. That transition between a pitch and what I would call musically a tone is the transition of a human being, of the act of adding emotive quality to just a sound. When that happens, it becomes music. And in this context, it's important to say something. Even our brain, apparently, when for a long time they thought that cells that, shall we say, identify certain frequencies, always identify this frequency the same way. But they discovered that depending on whether the melody or the movement is ascending or descending, the same cells recognize that tone or that note differently. Which means associative movement or associated movement, which is also an emotive quality, there's also a way by which we recognize something as being music rather than just something being tonal or something being pitch. Now, when we talk about music, and even we speak to mathematicians, they use another word very often, a dangerous word, beauty. It's a word that musicians often speak about beauty and mathematicians often speak about beauty. They say there needs to be beauty in mathematics. And you always wonder, what are we talking about? Are we just talking about taste? You may like my music, somebody may hate my music. Is it just taste? Is it just about what you prefer and what I prefer? Or is there something about beauty that can transcend each person's taste? Is there something? And you ask the same question of mathematicians. What are they saying when they say there should be beauty in an equation or in a solution? What do they mean? Is it beauty that only one mathematician observes, or is it shared by the community? And many times it is shared by the community. What is that beauty they're looking for? So we have to think about this idea of beauty that is used as a term or as a quality in both mathematics and music. And there's this fabulous essay written by Hardy again. For those who don't know who Hardy was the person who supported Srinivasa Ramanujam when he went out to UK, and pretty much the person who mentored him. So to give you a context for G.H. Hardy, this is fabulous essay called A Mathematician's Apology. I can tell you it's a very arrogant essay, of course, and many things in it I disagree with. But it's also a beautiful essay. And there is this passage I'm going to read from that essay, which has always captivated me. The mathematician's patterns, like the painters or the poets, must be beautiful. The ideas, like the colors or the words, must fit together in a harmonious way. Beauty is the first test. There is no permanent place in the world for ugly mathematics. Fascinating. He's used entirely terms that I would associate with the world of art in describing mathematics. And in the words that he's used, 3 words for me stood out for inquiry. One was beauty, beautiful. The other is the idea of harmonious. And the third, the notion of permanence. He believes that mathematics must be beautiful, it must be harmonious, and only if it is beautiful and harmonious is there a space for it that makes it permanent. And when I first read it, it of course got me thinking about music and said, do we think in this manner? Or what does he mean by beautiful? What is he looking for in beautiful mathematics? What am I looking for in beautiful music? Of course, I prefer certain musicians, I prefer certain kinds of music. So the first question is, am I really looking for beauty when I prefer things? And I want to push this a bit before I proceed. Or am I just reacting to my habit? In other words, like I said, I heard some kind of vocal music which I thought was awful, off key, just terrible. Was it really terrible, or was I incapable of seeing its beauty? Was it really terrible, or was I incapable of seeing its beauty? So then, whenever we judge things, when we judge something as beautiful or something that we like, or the colors that we choose, for example, I can imagine certain colors are immediately considered to be ugly. I mean, everybody thinks a fluorescent pink house outside looks kind of weird. A lot of people do. Why? Why do we think it's ugly? Or why do we think it's too garish? We use so many words. Is it that, or is it me? So, this beauty we're discussing cannot be trapped in this. It can't be a subjective idea of judgment. So, is there an idea of beauty that transcends your judgment and my judgment? This is a very important social question too. It's not just a mathematical question. It's a social question. I look at a person and I decide whether I can trust that person. Amazing how we do that. We look at their face, we look at their dress, we look at how dirty or clean they may be. We suspect, who will we suspect to be a robber? Somebody looking like me? No. You would never think I'm a thief, would you? But isn't that a sensibility of physical appearance? Or a judgment of physical appearance that leads to us to judge so many things. So when Hardy talks about beauty in math, or when I speak about beauty in music, is it possible that we can transcend just these superficial layers? So what is beauty in music? I can speak more confidently about the area that I know, which is music. For understanding beauty in music, I have to use another word, and the word is aesthetics. Again, a word that we use very colloquially and we use very easily. Something is aesthetic because it pleases us. Something that is what we think is, within quotes, subtle or pleasant. Look at the words we use. Pleasant, nice, subtle, soft. Nobody can say something soft is unaesthetic. I've never heard anybody say that. Of course, heavy metal can be unaesthetic, very fast, right? Loud and, don't play this loud music. I don't know how many students here have heard their parents say that to them, but that's often heard, right? This loud music. So what are we talking about? If you look at the word aesthetics, it's actually a very interesting word. Any Greek word that has tikos at the end, right, means that it's a body of empirically arrived ideas. Now, empiricity seems a very unusual term to use in aesthetics. What is empirical about aesthetics? Or in other words, if I was going to just elaborate it, it's arrived through observation and through learning. So it's a science of perception. So aesthetics is not about what you like or dislike. It is about the object. Now, I stand here at the lectern. Now, the lectern there are two parts of this lectern. Let's forget about whether it's pretty or not. Prettiness has got nothing to do with aesthetics. It has, an intention of how it's built. It must be in such a manner that you see my face, that it's around my chest that it is there, or the mic is adjusted. It should give a certain formality to this evening's lecture. If all this is there in this lectern, then this lectern is an aesthetic lectern at a basic level. Over and above this, we may have carvings, etc. But the carvings don't determine its aesthetic body. If you have a most beautifully carved table that doesn't stand on 4 legs, it is an unaesthetic table. If it doesn't stand on 4 legs, and if it cannot do the job of being a table, it's an unaesthetic table. So a very important aspect of the word aesthetic is also the intention of what is being done or what is being built, or the intention of the music I do, or the intention of the math that is being done. The intention of the math and the intention of the music determine its movement, determines its content, determine its transformation, and that determines its experience. What you like or dislike is immaterial to this observation. So when Hardy speaks about beauty, he's speaking about this beauty. The beauty that within that whole idea that is being inquired about, there is a beauty of its flow, its logic, its development, its transformation. And he doesn't really care about the conclusion. He's just talking about all this. Similarly, in the musical form that I sing, it is about the object, its construction, what it intends to do, what I intend to do with it. That's what determines whether something is aesthetic or not. If we were going to just change our way of looking at people and looking at colors and looking at designs and looking at everything with this adjustment, we may actually be slightly better human beings. So math can teach us something about human beings, about being better human beings also, because it gives us a distance between the self and between an idea. But then what does it mean about being, the other word that he uses is harmonious. What is harmonious? Again, harmony is again a musical term. We use it in music, technically and non-technically. So it again means that there's a relationship. There is a correlation. It's not just about pattern recognition and pattern assimilation. It's about what is the connection between patterns. It is like, what is my relationship with the people around my home? It is a relationship, not just the people I know, but everybody else around my home, who lives on my back street. That is part of a harmonious community. Not just who you choose to live with, but who live around you. So, harmonious correlations are very important even in mathematics when these ideas are being developed. And they're very important in music. I sing a concert. I sing a concert with a violinist and a mridangam artist and probably another artist. It's important that we have a relationship, at least musically, that's harmonious. What does that mean? It means that we believe in the same notion of the concert, that somehow we are together in what we want to do. Many times in concerts, we are fighting with each other. You just don't maybe recognize it, but it happens. We are battling each other's egos. We are having one-upmanship. One person decides that if I want to pull somebody down, I go to the extent I can to pull that person down. So, nothing harmonious is happening. But we all still applaud. We all still love it. But there is nothing beautiful really happening that day. And as musicians, we've experienced it many times. We come out of the concert absolutely either filled with our arrogance or dejected or angry or upset. We may have got a standing ovation, but there's nothing harmonious. And the harmony comes from being together. This togetherness, whether it is ideas, whether it is human beings, whether it is melodies, is all the same. And according to Hardy, it is only when there is this, shall we say, unselfish understanding of beauty, this unselfish understanding of harmony, is there permanence in math. And maybe there is only then permanence even in music. And maybe there is permanence only in society, only if we have this attitude when we make art. But many people also say this, right? Music is about emotion. Math is this cold-blooded thing. Like mathematician with a piece of paper or a blackboard, where is the heart in it? But that's not necessarily true. If you speak to any mathematician, they will tell you that the result actually doesn't matter. There are so many mathematicians who have worked for years and years and years and have not found a solution. Then what are they doing? There's another issue here. We use this word problem right from school, right? That's such a problematic word. For math, it's not a problem, isn't it? Is it a problem? No, it's a fascinating possibility. Why don't we call it that? We call it a math problem. The negativity starts right there. But actually, it is not a problem. It's an idea. It's a possibility. It's a question. It's an exciting moment. I can tell you, I never found it exciting when I was in school. Now I can give you all this, but that apart. You know, we never think of math in that manner. Or even in music. I sing a phrase of music. When I teach my students, I always tell them my job is only one thing. It's actually a very simple job if only I can do it well. Is to point to a possibility that you don't see. That's all. As a teacher, that's all my job is. Just teach you how to see a possibility that you don't see, but I see. Isn't that what a math problem is? It's a possibility that somebody sees that other person doesn't see. And that possibility is exciting. And then you go past it, you go into it, you go beyond it, and maybe it transforms to a completely different being, just like in music, where we begin and where we are after 20 minutes sometimes are so disconnected. We are like, where did we start? And it's the same with a lot of work in science too. So both, I read a piece where a mathematician said, mathematics must excite the soul. Thought what such a beautiful expression. Mathematics must excite the soul. It's an emotional experience. Eureka, for example, was an emotional moment, isn't it? He screamed Eureka. It's excitement. And why did he scream? Not because he solved the problem. He screamed because he discovered something. He stumbled upon something. This is very similar to the exhilaration I get when I sing something. I'm like, wow. Not because I sang it, but because it is just wow. We make this cardinal error of separating an intellectual activity and an emotional experience. We do it from school. We somehow think certain things are emotional, certain things intellectual. The most intellectual things you have to feel. You have to feel the most intellectual things. There's nothing non-emotive about the intellect. The most important computations that you do, you have to feel because you've gone somewhere with it. It could be in any field of activity. It could be economics. It could be anything. But then it takes you somewhere and then you feel, wow, this is possible. And you experience it. So this separation of the intellect and the emotional is something I think we should stop doing because they have to coexist in all fields, let alone math or music. It can be anything. And I spoke about collaboration, about how music is collaborative, how we collaborate between musicians on stage. Math is considered to be a lonely activity. We have this picture of this mathematician, right? All of us have this dusty library with books and papers all over, probably guy who was not bathed for a few days or more, just scribbling in piece of papers, not knowing where to go. This complete image comes into our head. But the mathematician, for two things, the mathematician may not meet somebody. It's quite possible. You're probably locked up in a room. But she or he is collaborating. The collaboration is in ideas. She is and listening to and has heard ideas before her or ideas that are happening then. She is collaborating, but she may not have to meet somebody to collaborate. So to think that it's a lonely activity in that sense is not necessarily entirely the truth. Similarly, there is a problem, the problem of the other side with music. I am perceived as a performer. I'm here to do something for you. That mine is a community exercise, yes. But I will be the first one to tell you that music is actually an activity of solitude. It's very similar to the mathematician. It's very similar. There are days when I have performed on stage, and I think those are the days when I probably did the best I ever have, musically, is when everyone in the audience became irrelevant to me. It didn't matter whether you liked what I did or hated what I did. I didn't care two hoots about it. I was alone in a public space, sitting on stage, and just singing because music mattered so much. Ideas mattered so much. And any musician will tell you that those were the best days of music. So is the musician alone or together? That's a catch-22 question. Is it a social activity or a personal activity? Very interesting to probe. So why I came there is because often we become like circus monkeys. Just like the mathematician is seen as this antisocial person seeking, who doesn't know how to communicate, etc. I am only seen as a person who should be communicating with you. My job is to please you. If I don't please you, I'm a bad musician. That's the other side of the same problem. Because then it doesn't allow me to be me. It doesn't allow me to just sing, because I love singing. Just because I'm on a stage, I'm told, there's this Hindi term, no, paisa vasool. So I'm told like I'm not giving you your money's worth. And there is a transactional compulsion that appears for me as a musician, as a performing musician, that a mathematician doesn't go through. But music actually lies beyond this transaction. So the question that again appears is, can we as audiences, I'm including myself, if I was seated on your side of the auditorium, can we respect that solitude even though it's happening in front of us in public? There is this story I always say, and I've had huge arguments with my students about it. I've said it in 2-3 public forums, and I'm going to repeat it here, and my student has vehemently fought me on this. So one of my teachers was the great musician Shammangudi Srinivasayar. And I joined him much later in his life, which was good, because he was far sober and he was far nice and more pleasant than what he was supposed to be when he was younger, at least to his students. So whenever I went to his home, which was in Roypeta, I used to make it a point to go to the window. And I would stand at the window. He couldn't see me. He would sit in, I don't know how many young people here, there's something called an EC chair. So it's one of those long chairs with 2 pieces of wood that go that way, and you can stretch your legs on it. He would be pretty much reclining on that. And he would be humming something, singing something. And I would go to the window and stand there for 15-20 minutes. He wouldn't know I'm there. At least initially he didn't. And I would listen to him, because he would sing music like I've never heard him sing anywhere. Okay? And after that I would enter, and he caught on, and then he asked me, so you were standing there for 10 minutes? So I said, yes. So the question that always bothered me is, why doesn't Shammangudi sing that music when he's on stage? What prevents him from bringing this quality when he's in front of 1,000 people? There have been counter-arguments saying the public space is different, each space has different tones, all accepted. But there is something that is stopping him from being that free person who is just in that embrace of music when he is in front of us. Something is being lost or hidden or kept behind. There is an unfreeness. There is a fettered person somehow, right? So this is the trap of the musician. So we have to understand then solitude differently, whether it is a mathematician or a musician. Solitude is not about being away or locked up in a room. You can be cluttered and muddled in a room, locked by yourself, disturbed by so many things that you don't find solitude. Solitude is a quality when you're alone. And it doesn't mean there are no people in front of you. You can find solitude while you walk through a market, bustling with activity, bustling with work. You can find solitude. So it's intentional, in an intent and a will of a certain kind of qualitative progression in the human being. So if we change that, then the way we think of solitude in being by oneself or with people will change tremendously. So as musicians on stage, sometimes all of us on stage are in solitude, in togetherness. Myself, my violinist, my mridangam artist, we are all together in solitude. Completely together. We are not alone, we are together. So we have to reimagine that. From this possibility of being in the throes of music or the throes of ideas, comes the word, or comes the much sought after quality, which is creativity. Another word that is so overused and so badly understood that sometimes I'm scared to even use that word. What is creativity? In especially today's world, new and creative have got conflated. Now, every day Instagram, you have something happening, right? Every day I feel an intention to do something on Instagram. Somebody wants to do something. You dance some 20 seconds to some song. Somebody dance 20 seconds to another song. Somebody does some, everybody wants, it's all acts, okay, for whatever reason. And of course, we all put likes for it. That's important. And the number of likes determine whether that is something that will go viral. Now, when it goes viral, does it mean something great has been done? Or something new has been done? Or something creative has been done? We're all confused. Truly, we're confused. We don't know. We don't know whether it's creative, we don't know whether it's new, we don't know whether it is of value, we don't know any of this, right? So when we say something creative, what does it mean? This is a question I think every one of us, irrespective of our age, irrespective of our field, have to ask ourselves. Because we have compulsive disorders today, all of us. We just keep doing something, including me. We just keep doing something. So what is new? What is creative? Does it need to be new to be creative? Can a repetitive act be creative? These are all important questions that I as an artist have to ask myself at least. So if I say, let's presume, for the sake of discussion and argument, that I have done something creative, okay, whatever that is, X, call it X. Is it something that everyone needs to recognize as creative? Or is it enough if I recognize as creative? What validation do I seek? Right? In math, it may be a little different because when a beautiful problem is approached or looked at, there is a universal way of looking at it, right? There are debates and arguments, of course. Nevertheless, there is. But in areas like music or something, it's a little more layered because there is no objective way of looking at that melody or that singing. So I would argue that again, creativity is not in whether something is new or old, but it is in the experience that it evokes in you. So, for example, a musical example, there could be a line of music or a song. There are songs that we sing in Carnatic music or any form of music that have been sung for maybe 50 years, 30 years by hundreds of musicians. Hundreds of musicians, sung by me probably 10 times in the last 20 days. But there is only one occasion out of that 10 in the last 20 days when something really profound happens in the singing. Is that creative or not? It's the same song, same tune, same melody, everything is the same. It's like when you look at, say, a beautiful mathematical equation or a mathematical solution which has been already created or already, shall we say, worked on 60 years ago, and you still look at it and say, aha, it's done. It's not new. It's been solved by X years ago. But why does it still make you feel, aha, oh, so beautiful. What a beautiful idea. So I just want to put this stop to creative being something that nobody has seen before in this universe before. Creative can be something that has been seen and has been repeated and that has been heard again, but it is in the way it is heard again or the way it is seen. The idea of permanence that Hardy speaks about is also an idea of creativity. So it can be either new in that literal sense or it can be old in the literal sense. That does not matter whether it is creative or not. But how do we arrive at that point of anything creative happening? Both in mathematics and music, there has to be a serious intent in work. And the intent is about it, whether it is an equation or whether it is a raga. The seriousness of swimming deep in, drowning myself. The Tamil word alvar is a very important word. Alvar with the saints, the Vaishnavite saints. Alvar means being drowned in the Lord. You have to be drowned in the equation. You have to be drowned in the music. And that is the serious intent that we demand. The second comes from the idea of solitude, which is being free, unfettered, to be able to think, to be able to find patterns, to find collaborations, to find designs, to be able to just be in wonder of the beauty of what is in front of you, whether it is X, Y, Z, or whether it is Sa, Re, Ga, it doesn't matter. That environment has to be there. And then there is one other word that mathematicians love to use, intuition. They say, great mathematics, there's intuition. I don't know whether how many of us know the difference between instinct and intuition. Often we use it as synonyms. They are actually different. Instinct is usually, is a faculty that neither ideationally or visually, it's not a faculty, okay? And it may or may not result in an action. That instinct, okay? It's not a faculty. Intuition, on the other side, is actually the ability to see something or to be able to apprehend something which leads to some learning. And that learning leads to that response that seems to be immediate, or that feeling that you're in the direction. For example, in the math world, there are many mathematicians who have said that this is a possibility or this is what is there without a proof. The proof has happened much later, found by somebody else. Now, how did this mathematician know that that was a possibility without proof actually giving you the proof? Because the learning that the mathematician had and the observation that the mathematician did gave her or him the feeling that this is where it is. And they just allowed it to come out. The proof happens much later. This is true of so many things in science. You will find that there is a hypothesis and an idea that is put out that this is what it should be. Then, for example, the black hole, for example, it's all mathematical initially. No observation could validate any of it. Higgs boson was mathematical. And then you do experiment it, and then you bring a proof which is in real life. That's one. Or a purely mathematical issue, or something about shapes and numbers, for example. The proof comes later. So this intuition is very important. In music too, intuition is so important. And because intuition does something that is fabulous. Its intuition is never bound by rules. Intuition somehow tells you that you can bend, you can break, you can find another window, you can find another door. You see a possibility that rules don't permit you. Happens in music very often. For example, if I sing a raga and it has a set of rules, and I'm taught from childhood that these are the rules of this melody, intuition sometimes tells me just for no reason. If you ask me logically why, I can't answer that question. But I know that all that I have received leads me in a direction to push some corner that's against the rules. But that push leads you to something that's never happened before, at least for yourself. So intuition is also a very important quality in both these fields. But why are we doing all this? Let's go back to that basic question. Why are we doing this? And the simple answer will be both music and math seek truth. The very simple answer. You could ask, what is truth? Isn't truth subjective? I think at the fundamental level, both these fields are trying to understand what is around us and what is within us. Whether you're trying to understand it in shapes and numbers or in functionalities, or even, for example, economic activity, game theory, for example, is a very interesting case of math telling you how people behave. They can tell you how nature behaves. But why do we know this? We just want to understand ourselves better. What we do with it is secondary. It comes afterwards. But this yearning to understand our functions, understand our behavior, understand our relationships is why we do this, why mathematicians do it, why musicians make music. I want to know why I cry. I want to know how I cry. I want to know what a tear means, what joy means, what ecstasy means. And that's why I sing. I don't sing to please you. If you're pleased, I'm happy. But I don't sing to please you. A mathematician doesn't work because he's sure that tomorrow his work is going to be used to make something. No. Mathematician works because he just looks at it and says, wow, there is truth in this. Let's find out how it works. Let's find out why. So there is something very basic, but here we should be very careful because this is not neither fields are about rationality and irrationality. Srinivasa Ramanujam always said that his inspiration was Namagiri goddess. You can wonder, how does Namagiri goddess appear in the horizon of this seeking? That is some belief system. Isn't this contradictory to each other? Or for example, Tyagaraja, the great composer, was a great Bhakta of Rama. But he made the most complex compositions. Do I have to be a Bhakta of Rama to also be able to be a great musician? No. But what is that association? Inspiration can come from anywhere. Keeping aside their own belief system, that is their personal, I'm not even going there. But inspiration is not a rational happening. It doesn't need to be justified. It doesn't have to have logic. It is just something that makes the human endeavor far more intense. Makes the human endeavor worth it. It just strikes you at the bottom of your stomach of saying, I just want to do this. And so we should not make that mistake of thinking about math as being something that is purely logical, and therefore there is no room for these unexplained things. The unexplained always exist. They are always part of the explained. But that's what we are trying to explain, aren't we? The unexplained in our own ways. I'll conclude with a few more things. One question that was raised by a friend of mine when I told him I'm going to speak here. So he said, actually a mathematician sent me a note and saying, I'd like to believe that music is created while math is discovered. This is a famous argument. Is math created or is it discovered? In other sense, is what is being explained already there but not seen or stumbled upon, vis-a-vis music which is being created by the artist? I'm not going to resolve this problem. But I think it's an interesting problem. But I would like to say a possibility here. For example, gravity. Was gravity discovered? Yes. But the understanding of gravity was created. So gravity was not created by anybody, by Newton or anybody. But the comprehension or how you understand it and process it was a creation of human endeavor. Then you can flip that question and ask me, is Raga Todi created or discovered? Is it already there? That's a tough one. I'm inclined to say created. Very inclined to say created. But then you could argue, counter-argue and say, but those sounds already exist somewhere. Fair enough. I'm sure it exists somewhere. But putting them together in that sense of cohesiveness and calling it by X name and giving it certain identities is definitely a human activity. So this leaves us with this interesting conundrum of discovery and creativity. But a Mridangam artist told me something. Or a sculptor, for example, great sculptors have said this. They said the sculpture is already there in the stone. I just revealed it to you. This is a very famous thing that sculptors say. Is it true? Is it already in the stone? Or is it in the sculptor's head? Fascinating, right? Or a Mridangam artist told me once, he said, he played something quite beautiful. And we were having this chat afterwards, and he said, I have done nothing new. I just stumbled upon it. It's already there. So, where is it if it's already there? Where is it? Is it there in the mind of the receiver? Is it there a community understands it? Or is it there in some subconscious of the artist? Well, it's up to you to decide. And finally, before I conclude, the difficult question of ethics in mathematics and ethics in music. Should there be ethics? Should there be an understanding of a societal role of these two activities? Should that affect what math I do or what music I do, what song I sing, what song I don't sing, where I sing, for whom I sing? Does it need to be at the back of my mind? There is again no absolute answer for this one. There is no absolute answer for it. But is the problem here, or is the observation slightly skewed? The ethics has to be in the individual, not in music or math. What excites you or what moves you in a direction determines your ethics. So the problem is not having ethics in math or ethic in music, in what I do or what I search, or whether my equation is going to land up making a horrible weapon. That's not the problem. Or my algorithm is going to be used, for example, for trolling people or for abusing people online. So is the man who made the algorithm an evil human being who didn't think of it? It doesn't work that way, does it? No, it's far more complicated. But then there is that question of our ethics when we are part of an endeavor, irrespective whether it's music or math or business or whatever it may be. What is it that drives us towards an idea? Why do we push an idea? Does the idea need to be challenged within ourselves? Do we need to question the ethics of the idea? Again, I don't know. But it is something that we should keep in mind in anything that we do. I'll conclude now. I think I've pretty much spoken for about 40 plus minutes. But I'll conclude by just saying one thing, that I was not here to speak about equations and about music and about how we use arithmetic, because to me that is still a superficial level of seeing disconnections and connections between these two fields of activity. But these two fields of activity, the most important aspect is the idea of abstracting human experience, is the idea of understanding human experience, human behavior, human living in a manner that is not bound by our limitations of habit, culture, judgment, etc. Both these fields hope that by seeing something from afar, from beyond the personal, we will see it hopefully for what it is and not for what we want to see it as. So both are seekings that don't stop at or for answers, importantly. A mathematician doesn't stop just because he solved one problem. That's just one step. Because the answer, both for a musician and a mathematician, is only another question. If I understand something in music, that is still a question for something else. And therefore the seeking continues, and it continues because we are seeking that elusive truth. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that very engaging and informative talk, sir. I'm sure many in the audience like me, and absolutely, definitely my students, will go back with an absolutely new perspective on music and math today. We now have the felicitation and presentation of memento. I request our principal, Mrs. Omna Thomas, and Ms. Sandhya Thomas, granddaughter of Mr. K.I. Thomas, to do the honor. I now call upon Ms. Sandhya Thomas to propose the vote of thanks.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank Shri T.M. Krishna for graciously accepting our invitation to speak at this year's Oration. The parallels drawn between the activities of mathematics and music as universal yet subjective emotional experiences in abstraction were intriguing, such that my voice is completely lost. Mr. Manoj Santalia and the New Indian Express, along with Raj TV, have consistently covered the Kit Thomas Memorial Oration for many years now. It is with gratitude that we acknowledge this year's media coverage as well. We extend our appreciation to Mr. Vinesh Goyal and Crown Plaza for tonight's dinner arrangements, and to Eden for organizing tea at the school this evening. We are much obliged to Mrs. Meera Maman for the elegant stage decor that you see before you. Thank you to Mr. Jackin Hemnath for working tirelessly with the school choir to ensure the harmonious rendering of the invocation hymn. This event would not be possible without the contribution of our service staff. It is with gratitude that we acknowledge their hard work under the guidance of Mr. Bharathan. Last, but definitely not the least, our appreciation and our gratitude to you, our dear audience, all Laurentians, alumni of Sishya, former and current parents and students who attend this event year after year and enable us to keep the legacy of Mr. K.I. Thomas alive. Thank you. Please stand for the national anthem.